Life-saving medications are prohibitively expensive for far too many Americans. Further compounding that problem is the fact that while patients in the US get price gouged by pharmaceutical companies, they're also using tax money to develop those same pharmaceutical drugs. In fact, Americans shelled out billions for the research and development of the 10 drugs that Medicare will soon be negotiating the prices of. How many billions exactly? Not a big deal, just $12 billion on 10 drugs. That's according to a new report from the Center for Integration of Science and Industry at Bentley University, which might actually be a pretty pricey institution with a name like that. I don't really know for sure, but anyway, that's a tangent, let's move on. That $12 billion wasn't just for the research of the drugs themselves, which is known as applied research. It also includes the cost of basic research, which Lever reporter Helen Santaro describes as the key foundational research that identifies a biological target like a protein or gene that may be linked to a disease and is the first step in drug development. Researchers examined 28 significant medicines approved by the US Food and Drug Administration between 1985 and 2009 and found that 80% of them could be traced back to basic research that sought to understand a biological process or disease. And I want to just really quickly reiterate again, that basic science, that basic research is research that the US taxpayer funded, along with the research and development of specific pharmaceutical drugs. Now, here are 9 of the 10 drugs that soon will be facing negotiations, as well as how much Americans spent on their development. I'm gonna do my best to avoid struggling through some of the names here, but these are the drugs that we're talking about. You have Stelara, developed by Johnson & Johnson and Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine. Americans spent $6.5 billion on the development of that drug. Enbrel, developed by Immunex Corporation. Americans spent $2.6 billion on that. Entresto, developed by Novartis, $901 million on the research and development of that and the basic science needed to develop that drug. Eliquis, developed by Bristol Myers Squibb and Pfizer, $791 million. Xarelto, developed by Bayer and Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine, $764 million. Then you have Imbruvica, developed by Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine and Pharmacyclics. We've spent $566 million, and the list goes on and on. I'm gonna pause so you can read the rest of that graphic so I don't have to do it on your behalf, because I'm pretty sure you know how to read. But you see the numbers there and they're jarring. $437 million, $434 million, $228 million. In other words, these pharmaceutical companies would fail to develop the very drugs that they profit from if it weren't for the research and development that we as American taxpayers have been providing them with. Okay, the money and the funds and the resources they need.
We might have millions of people watching this show, but you can be the difference maker, because we just need 1% of our audience to be paid members, and then this show can be around forever. So you can make that difference. Click join now.
Now, the 10th drug is called Novolog, and it treats type 1 and type 2 diabetes. It was not included on the list because basic research on insulin occurred many, many years ago. So it's not known just how much the government spent on it. But if you thought those numbers were infuriating, get a load of this. In 2022 alone, the 10 medicines netted their manufacturers more than $70 billion in total revenue, according to a Lever analysis. Now, the $7 billion in revenue is not their net profit. It's important to keep that in mind, but it doesn't matter. These drugs have made them $70 billion. So the medicines also put tremendous strain on both Medicare patients and the Medicare system itself. In 2022, Medicare patients spent $3.4 billion out of pocket on these medications, a number that increased by 116% over a 4-year span. Total Medicare spending to pay for enrollees' use of these vital drugs more than doubled from about $20 billion in 2018 to $50.5 billion in 2023. Paying for these particular drugs accounted for roughly 20% of all Medicare spending on prescription drugs between the summer of 2023 and the spring of 2020. I'm sorry, the summer of 2022 and the spring of 2023. So over that 1 year span. Now, the average annual out-of-pocket cost for Stelara, an injectable drug that treats autoimmune conditions, rose the most from just a measly $709 per enrollee to a whopping $2,058. By the way, both figures are outrageous. A 2019 report found that the regular price of Stelara was $16,600 per dose in the United States, compared to $2,900 per dose in the United Kingdom, where they're free to negotiate their drug prices. We're not allowed to do that here in the United States. Stelara received by far the most taxpayer funding for its research. This story helps to explain why so many Americans struggle with getting proper medical care. More than 5 million Medicare beneficiaries struggle to afford their prescriptions, particularly those who do not receive a low-income subsidy that lowers out-of-pocket spending. Racial income disparities also play a role here because Black and Latino enrollees report affordability problems at 1.5 to 2 times the rate of their white counterparts. Big Pharma loves raking in these ill-gotten gains, so the industry also lobbied ferociously to prevent the Inflation Reduction Act from permitting Medicare to negotiate the drug prices of all drugs. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 was the top bill targeted in federal lobbying efforts across all industries in 2022, with 1,647 organizations reporting lobbying it. And that's according to an analysis done by Open Secrets. Remember, initially the bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, was supposed to include a provision that would allow Medicare to negotiate the prices of all pharmaceutical drugs. But that provision was whittled down to just 10 drugs following intense lobbying efforts. The top lobbyists were from the health sector. There are currently 1,834 registered lobbyists working for pharmaceutical and health products, meaning the industry has more than 3 lobbyists for each member of Congress. Over half of these lobbyists are so-called revolving door hires who previously served in government positions before joining the private sector. What really highlights how profitable it is for these drug companies to price gouge Americans is how much they're willing to invest in preventing laws that would allow for price negotiations. So in 2022 alone, for instance, the drug companies spent over $375 million to lobby Congress. That's in 1 year. And guess what? That's actually chump change when you consider their profits. So legalized bribes are a smart investment for the industry. Pharmaceutical companies also get a staggering return on their investments. Between 2012 and 2021, the 14 largest publicly traded pharmaceutical companies spent $747 billion on stock buybacks and dividends for their shareholders, substantially more than the $660 billion they spent on research and development. Well, I mean, they don't really spend as much as the American people do on the research and development of those very drugs that they then price gouge us on. If that's not injustice, I don't know what is.